They say paranoia is just good sense in marriage. If that's true, then I should have been Einstein by now, because something was definitely wrong with Olivia. My name is Adam Brooks, and 3 months ago I thought I had it all figured out. Successful tech company, beautiful wife, nice house in Brookline's most expensive neighborhood. The American dream wrapped up in a neat little package with a bow on top. Turns out the bow was hiding a bomb. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. It started with the little things. Olivia coming home late from her job as a fashion buyer, claiming endless client meetings, new perfume I'd never smelled before, designer dresses I'd never seen, which was saying something since I'd been funding her wardrobe for 15 years. Working late again? I asked one Thursday evening as she breezed through our marble foyer, looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. You know how it is, honey, she said without looking at me, already heading upstairs. Fashion never sleeps. Neither did my suspicious mind, apparently. I sat in our living room, nursing a scotch and watching the news, but really listening to her phone calls upstairs. Muffled conversations, lots of giggling. When was the last time I'd made Olivia giggle? The next morning, I decided to do what any rational husband would do. I called my best friend Marcus Lee, my co-founder at Brooks Tech Solutions. You sound paranoid, Marcus said over coffee at our usual spot downtown. Maybe she's planning a surprise party or something? My birthday was 6 months ago. Anniversary? 4 months away. Marcus stirred his coffee thoughtfully. Okay, so maybe she's having an affair? Thanks for the pep talk, Marcus. Hey, I'm just saying what you're thinking. The question is, what are you going to do about it? That's when I hired Frankie Doyle, a private investigator who looked like he'd stepped out of a noir film. Rumpled coat, 5 o'clock shadow at 10 in the morning, and the kind of cynical smile that said he'd seen every type of human garbage imaginable. Cheating spouse? He asked before I'd even sat down in his cramped office. Is it that obvious? Buddy, 90% of my business is cheating spouses. The other 10% is insurance fraud, and you don't look like the type to torch your own car. I paid his retainer and went home to play the role of oblivious husband. It wasn't hard. Olivia barely acknowledged my existence anymore, too busy texting someone who made her smile in ways I apparently couldn't. 2 weeks later, Frankie called with news that hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. You need to see this, he said. Meet me at Murphy's Bar on Tremont Street. Bring tissues. Murphy's was the kind of dive bar where dreams went to die, which seemed appropriate. Frankie slid a manila envelope across the sticky table, and I opened it with hands that weren't quite steady. Photos, lots of them. Olivia laughing with a man I'd never seen before, tall and handsome in that generic way that screamed con artist. Olivia kissing him outside the Four Seasons. Olivia trying on what looked like an engagement ring while he watched with the satisfied expression of a cat who'd caught the canary. His name is Danny Harper, Frankie said. At least that's what he's calling himself this week. This week? That's where it gets interesting. Your wife's boyfriend is a professional grifter. Fake business cards, phony investment schemes, the whole 9 yards. He's got at least 3 different identities that I've found so far. I stared at the photos, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Not heartbreak exactly. More like the moment when you realize you've been playing poker with a marked deck. How long? I asked. Best guess? 4 months, maybe 5. 5 months. While I'd been working 16-hour days to keep our company competitive, Olivia had been playing house with a con man who probably saw her as his next big score. What's his angle? I asked. Frankie pulled out another photo. This is Danny with his previous mark, a widow from Newton. He cleaned out her retirement account before disappearing. Before that, a divorcee in Cambridge who lost her settlement money. Your boy's got a type. Wealthy women going through transitions? Bingo. And what's your wife going through right now? I thought about it. Olivia had been complaining about feeling unfulfilled, talking about wanting more excitement in her life. She'd even mentioned feeling trapped in our marriage, though at the time I'd chalked it up to a midlife crisis. She's bored, I said. And rich? Don't forget rich. I finished my beer and stood up. Send me everything you've got. Photos, background checks, financial records, everything. What are you planning to do? I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt genuine. I'm going to give my wife exactly what she deserves. The first step was reconnaissance. I couldn't just confront Olivia and Danny directly. That would be too easy, too clean. They'd had months to plan whatever they were planning. I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. I started by having lunch at the restaurant where Olivia claimed to meet clients. Funny thing about lies, they're only as strong as their weakest detail. The maitre d' knew me, and when I casually mentioned my wife's business lunches, he looked confused. "Mrs. Brooks? I haven't seen her here in months." Strike one. Next, I called her office, pretending to be a flower delivery service. Her assistant, a sweet girl named Rachel, cheerfully informed me that Mrs. Brooks had been taking a lot of personal days lately. "She's been working from home mostly," Rachel said. "Something about a special project." Strike two. The special project, as it turned out, was Danny Harper, or whatever his real name was. Frankie's deeper investigation revealed a trail of aliases going back years. Daniel Harrison, David Hartwell, Derek Hampton. The man collected identities like some people collected stamps. "Here's the really interesting part," Frankie said during our next meeting. "He's married." "What?" "Legally married to a woman named Jenna Kowalski in Springfield. Has been for 8 years. She filed for divorce twice, but never followed through." This was getting better and better. Not only was my wife having an affair with a con artist, she was having an affair with a married con artist. "I want to talk to the wife," I said. "I figured you might. I already reached out. She's willing to meet." Jenna Kowalski turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who looked like she'd been through hell and come out swinging. We met at a coffee shop in Springfield, far enough from Boston that we wouldn't run into anyone we knew. "So, you're the latest victim," she said without preamble. "Looks that way. How much has he taken you for?" "Nothing yet, but I think that's the plan." Jenna laughed bitterly. "Oh, it's definitely the plan. Danny doesn't do anything without a plan. He's probably been studying your finances for months, figuring out the best way to separate you from your money." She pulled out her phone and showed me photos. Danny with different women, always the same pose, arm around their shoulders, big smile, looking like the perfect boyfriend. "He's got a whole system," she explained. "First, he identifies the target, usually someone with money who's going through a rough patch. Then he becomes exactly what they need: supportive, romantic, understanding, everything their current situation isn't giving them. And then? Then he starts talking about investments, business opportunities, ways to make their money work harder. He's very convincing." I thought about Olivia's recent complaints about our conservative investment strategy. She'd been pushing me to take bigger risks, invest in startups, diversify into areas I didn't understand. At the time, I'd assumed it was just restlessness. Now I realized it was Danny's influence. "What's the end game?" I asked. "Usually, he gets them to liquidate assets, put everything into some fake investment scheme, then disappears with the money. Sometimes he marries them first to make the con more legitimate." The engagement ring in the photos suddenly made sense. "But here's the thing," Jenna continued. "Danny's gotten sloppy. He used to be more careful about covering his tracks. I think success has made him overconfident." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we take him down, together." I liked Jenna immediately. She had the same cold anger I was feeling, but she'd had years to refine it into something sharp and focused. Over the next hour, we outlined a plan that would expose Danny for what he was and leave both him and Olivia with nothing but the wreckage of their betrayal. "One question," I said as we prepared to leave. "Why help me? What's in it for you?" Jenna's smile was razor thin. "Danny destroyed my life once. Now I get to return the favor." The plan we developed was elegant in its simplicity. Instead of trying to prevent Danny's con, we were going to let it play out, right up until the moment it all came crashing down. Step one was gathering evidence. Real evidence, not just photos of secret lunches. I needed proof of Danny's criminal history, documentation of his fake identities, and most importantly, evidence that Olivia was actively participating in whatever scheme they were cooking up. This meant getting access to Olivia's phone and computer, which was easier said than done. She'd become paranoid about privacy lately, changing passwords and keeping her devices locked. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She hadn't changed the password on our shared iCloud account. Late one night, while she slept beside me dreaming of her new life, I downloaded every text, email, and photo from her phone. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Olivia wasn't just having an affair. She was actively helping Danny research my business, my finances, my investment accounts. She'd photographed important documents, shared confidential information about our company, and even researched divorce lawyers who specialized in maximizing settlement outcomes. But the smoking gun was an email thread between Olivia and Danny discussing something called Project Fresh Start. The details were vague, but the timeline was clear. They were planning to make their move within the next month. Project Fresh Start involves liquidating certain assets, one email read. O will need to convince A to sign transfer documents. Suggest framing as tax optimization strategy. Another email was even more damning. Once transfers are complete, O can file for divorce. Prenup becomes void if A is found to have hidden assets offshore. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were planning to frame me for financial crimes I hadn't committed, void our prenuptial agreement, and leave me with nothing while they disappeared with my life's work. I printed everything and made multiple copies. Then I called my lawyer. Samantha Brandt was the kind of attorney who smiled like a shark and charged like one too. She'd handled our prenup years ago and knew every detail of our financial arrangements. "This is quite a mess you found yourself in," she said after reviewing the evidence, "but it's not without opportunities." "Opportunities?" "Your wife and her boyfriend have made several crucial mistakes. First, they've documented their conspiracy in writing. Second, they've involved you in their scheme without your knowledge, which makes you a victim rather than a participant. Third, they haven't actually committed any crimes yet." "How is that an opportunity?" "Because it means we can control the narrative. Instead of reacting to their plan, we can get ahead of it." Samantha outlined a counter-strategy that was breathtaking in its ruthlessness. We would let Danny and Olivia believe their plan was working, while simultaneously building a case that would destroy them both. "The key is timing," she explained. "We need to let them get far enough into their scheme that they can't back out, but not so far that they actually succeed." "What about the evidence of Danny's other crimes?" "That's where your friend Jenna comes in. If she's willing to testify about Danny's pattern of behavior, we can establish him as a serial con artist. That makes your wife either a victim or an accomplice. Given these emails, I'd say accomplice." I left Samantha's office feeling like I just loaded a weapon. Now I needed to wait for the right moment to fire it. That moment came sooner than expected. The next week, Olivia approached me with a proposal that was obviously scripted. "Adam, honey, I've been thinking about our investment strategy," she said over dinner at our kitchen island. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen, probably a gift from Danny. "What about it?" "Well, we're being so conservative. All our money is just sitting in boring mutual funds and treasury bonds. We're missing out on real opportunities." "Such as?" "I met this financial advisor through work. He specializes in high-yield international investments, tax shelters, emerging markets, cryptocurrency ventures. The returns are incredible." I almost laughed. Danny wasn't even trying to be original. "Sounds risky," I said, playing my part. "That's just it. It's not. Not if you know what you're doing. This advisor, he's helped so many people optimize their portfolios. He could probably triple our net worth in 2 years." "What's his name?" "David Hartwell. He's got offices in Boston and New York, very exclusive clientele." David Hartwell, one of Danny's aliases. I had to admire his confidence, using a name that Jenna had already connected to previous cons. "I'd like to meet him," I said. Olivia's face lit up. "Really? I was hoping you'd say that. I already set up a meeting for tomorrow." Of course she had. The meeting was at a rented office in downtown Boston, the kind of generic business space that screamed temporary operation. Danny was there waiting for us, dressed in an expensive suit and radiating the kind of confident charm that probably worked on most people. "Mr. Brooks," he said, standing to shake my hand, "I've heard so much about you. Your wife speaks very highly of your business acumen." "Does she?" I glanced at Olivia, who was practically glowing with excitement. For the next hour, Danny walked us through his investment strategy, which was essentially a Ponzi scheme dressed up in financial jargon. Offshore accounts, cryptocurrency mining, exclusive partnerships with foreign banks, all the classic red flags wrapped in a presentation that looked professional enough to fool someone who wasn't looking for them. "The minimum investment is $500,000, Danny explained. "But for someone in your position, I'd recommend starting with at least $2 million. That's where you really start to see exponential returns. $2 million. Roughly half of our liquid assets." "I'll need to think about it," I said. "Of course. But I should mention, I only take on a limited number of clients each year. This opportunity won't be available indefinitely." The artificial scarcity close. Danny really was following the con artist playbook word for word. "How long do I have to decide?" 2 weeks. After that, I'll be focusing on my European clients." Perfect. That gave me plenty of time to set the trap. Over the next 10 days, I played the role of interested but cautious investor. I asked Danny detailed questions about his background, his other clients, his investment strategies. Every answer he gave me was a lie, and I documented all of it. Meanwhile, Jenna was working her own angle. She'd contacted several of Danny's previous victims and convinced them to file complaints with the FBI. Not enough to get him arrested immediately, but enough to put him on law enforcement's radar. "The key is coordination," Jenna explained during one of our secret meetings. "We need everything to happen at once. If Danny gets spooked, he'll disappear and start over somewhere else with a new identity." "What about Olivia?" What about her? She made her choice. Jenna was right, but it was still hard to accept. I'd been married to Olivia for 15 years. We'd built a life together, shared dreams and disappointments. The woman who was now plotting to destroy me was someone I'd once loved enough to promise forever to. But that woman was gone, if she'd ever really existed. The person sleeping next to me now was a stranger who saw me as nothing more than a bank account to be emptied. The confrontation I'd been planning finally came together on a Friday evening. I'd told Danny I was ready to invest, and we'd scheduled a meeting to sign the paperwork and transfer the funds. What Danny didn't know was that the FBI would be waiting for him, armed with evidence of his previous crimes and documentation of his current scheme. But first, I had some personal business to take care of. Olivia, I said as she prepared to leave for what she thought would be our final meeting with Danny. We need to talk. Can it wait? David is expecting us in an hour. David Hartwell doesn't exist. She froze. What are you talking about? I'm talking about Danny Harper, also known as Daniel Harrison, Derek Hampton, and half a dozen other aliases. I'm talking about his wife Jenna in Springfield. I'm talking about the victims he's conned over the past 5 years. I'm talking about Project Fresh Start. The color drained from Olivia's face. Adam, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain why you've been photographing confidential business documents? Can you explain why you've been researching divorce lawyers who specialize in hiding assets? Can you explain why you've been planning to frame me for financial crimes I didn't commit? She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. How did I find out? The same way I found out about everything else. I hired professionals, people who are very good at uncovering the truth. Olivia sank into a chair, her carefully constructed facade finally cracking. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? I was lonely, Adam. You're always working, always focused on the business. I felt invisible in my own marriage. So you decided to steal everything I've worked for? It wasn't stealing. It was redistribution. You have so much, and I have nothing that's really mine. You have half of everything I've built. That was our agreement. Half of what you decide to give me, half of what the prenup allows. I wanted something that was mine, something I'd earned. By lying and cheating and conspiring with a criminal? Tears were streaming down her face now, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no lingering love, just cold satisfaction that the mask had finally come off. What happens now? She asked. Now? Now you call Danny and tell him the meeting is off. Tell him whatever you want, that I got suspicious, that you changed your mind, that you need more time. I don't care. And then? And then you pack your things and get out of my house. Tonight. Adam, please what? Please forgive you for trying to destroy my life. Please pretend this never happened. Please give you another chance to finish what you started. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. I love you. No, you don't. You love what I can provide. There's a difference. I walked to the window and looked out at our perfectly manicured lawn, our expensive cars in the driveway, our neighbors' equally impressive houses. The whole neighborhood was a monument to success and stability, but it was all just surface. Underneath, everyone was fighting their own private wars. I've already spoken to my lawyer, I continued. The divorce papers will be filed on Monday. Given the evidence of your conspiracy with Danny, the prenup stands. You'll get nothing except what I'm legally required to give you, which isn't much. You can't do this. I can, and I am. You wanted a fresh start? Congratulations, you're getting one. Olivia left that night, taking only what she could fit in her car. I watched from the window as she loaded suitcases into her BMW, moving like someone in a dream, or a nightmare. She never called Danny to cancel the meeting. Maybe she forgot, or maybe she was hoping he could still salvage something from the wreckage of their plan. Either way, it didn't matter. Danny kept the appointment and walked straight into the FBI's trap. I wasn't there to see it, but Jenna was. She called me afterwards, her voice bright with vindictive joy. It was beautiful, she said. He walked into that office like he owned the world and walked out in handcuffs. They got him for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. He's looking at 10 to 15 years. What about the other victims? They're going to get some of their money back. Not all of it, but something, more than they had yesterday. I felt a satisfaction deeper than anything I'd experienced in months. Not just because Danny was finally facing consequences for his crimes, but because I'd been the one to make it happen. I'd taken control of a situation where I was supposed to be the victim and turned it around completely. But the story wasn't over yet. There was still one more move to make. The next morning, I called Marcus and asked him to meet me for breakfast. He arrived looking concerned, probably expecting me to be devastated by my wife's betrayal. "How are you holding up?" he he asked. Better than expected. Actually, I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? The kind that involves expanding Brooks Tech Solutions into new markets. I'm going to have some additional capital available soon, and I want to invest it in something meaningful. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Additional capital? Let's just say my overhead is about to decrease significantly. We spent the next 2 hours planning the expansion of our company. New offices, additional staff, research and development projects we'd been putting off for years. By the time we finished, I felt more energized than I had in months. You know, Marcus said as we prepared to leave, I always thought Olivia was wrong for you. Really? You never said anything? It wasn't my place. But she never seemed to appreciate what she had. She was always looking for something else, something more. Well, now she can look for it on her own. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, Olivia's voice was small and defeated. Adam, it's me. What do you want, Olivia? I heard about Danny, about his arrest. Did you? I didn't know. About his other victims, his real identity, any of it. I thought he was legitimate. No, you didn't. You knew exactly what he was. You just didn't care as long as you got what you wanted. That's not true. I have your emails, Olivia. I have the photos you took of confidential documents. I have your research on divorce lawyers and asset hiding strategies. You knew exactly what you were doing. Silence on the other end of the line. I'm staying at my sister's, she finally said. I don't have anywhere else to go. That's not my problem anymore. Everything I own is in that house. My clothes, my jewelry, my personal things. I'll have them packed and delivered. You'll get everything that's actually yours. What about us? What about our marriage? What marriage? You destroyed it the moment you decided to betray me. People make mistakes, Adam. People deserve second chances. Some mistakes don't get second chances. Some betrayals are unforgivable. I hung up and blocked her number. Whatever happened to Olivia from this point forward was her responsibility, not mine. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. Thanks to the prenuptial agreement and the evidence of Olivia's conspiracy, I kept virtually everything. The house, the business, the investments, all of it remained mine. Olivia got a small settlement and the BMW, which was more than she deserved but less than she'd expected. Danny was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His real wife, Jenna, finally went through with the divorce and moved to California to start over. She sent me a postcard from San Diego with a simple message. Thanks for helping me close that chapter. As for me, I threw myself into expanding Brooks Tech Solutions. We opened offices in 3 new cities, hired 50 additional employees, and launched products that had been stuck in development for years. The company's valuation tripled within 6 months. I also started dating again, though I was much more careful this time. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal easily, but I was learning to recognize the difference between someone who wanted to share my life and someone who wanted to take it over. One evening, almost a year after Olivia left, I was working late in my home office when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I wondered if it might be Olivia coming to make one final plea for reconciliation. But when I opened the door, I found a young woman I didn't recognize. She was nervous, fidgeting with her purse strap and looking like she might bolt at any moment. Mr. Brooks, my name is Sarah Chen. I was one of Danny Harper's victims. I invited her in and made coffee while she explained why she'd come. Danny had stolen her inheritance, money left to her by her grandmother that was supposed to help her start a small business. The FBI had recovered some of it, but not enough to make her whole. I wanted to thank you, she said. If you hadn't exposed him, he would have kept destroying lives. I know it probably doesn't mean much coming from a stranger, but what you did mattered. It meant more than she knew. For months, I'd wondered if my revenge against Danny and Olivia had been justified or just petty vindictiveness. Sarah's visit reminded me that there had been larger stakes involved than just my personal betrayal. What will you do now? I asked. Start over, I guess. Find a job, save money, maybe try again in a few years. What kind of business were you planning to start? A bakery. I know it sounds silly, but I've always loved baking. My grandmother taught me when I was little. It didn't sound silly at all. It sounded like someone with a dream who'd been knocked down but was determined to get back up. Brooks Tech has been looking for someone to run the cafe in our new downtown office, I said. It's not exactly a bakery, but it would involve food service and business management. Interested? Sarah's face lit up. Are you serious? Completely. The pay is good, there's room for growth, and if you prove yourself, I might be willing to invest in that bakery someday. She started crying, which made me realize how long it had been since I'd made someone happy just by being decent to them. Olivia had trained me to expect that every kindness would be met with demands for more, every gesture would be seen as weakness to be exploited. But Sarah was different. She was grateful without being grasping, hopeful without being entitled. She reminded me that there were still good people in the world, people worth trusting and helping. 6 months later, Brooks Tech Solutions was named one of Boston's fastest-growing companies. Sarah's Cafe had become the most popular lunch spot in the financial district, and she was already making plans for her bakery. I'd started dating a woman named Jennifer, a teacher who had her own life and her own dreams and wasn't interested in taking over mine. And Olivia, I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to Florida and was working as a sales clerk in a department store. Apparently, she'd tried to reconnect with Danny through prison correspondence, but he'd stopped responding to her letters. Even con artists have standards, I suppose. I never felt sorry for her. She'd made her choices with full knowledge of the consequences. The fact that those consequences had been worse than she'd expected wasn't my problem or my fault. One evening, I was having dinner with Jennifer when she asked me something that caught me off guard. "Do you ever regret how things ended with your ex-wife?" I thought about it for a moment. I regret that it happened at all. I regret that I married someone who was capable of that kind of betrayal. But I don't regret how I handled it. Even though it destroyed her life? She destroyed her own life. I just made sure she couldn't destroy mine in the process. Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. I can respect that. Sometimes being kind means being ruthless. That night, lying in bed, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 2 years. The betrayal, the investigation, the revenge, the aftermath. It had been the worst and best period of my life. Worst because of what I'd lost, best because of what I'd gained. I'd lost a wife, but I'd gained self-respect. I'd lost the illusion of a happy marriage, but I'd gained the reality of a successful business and meaningful relationships. I'd lost my faith in unconditional trust, but I'd gained the wisdom to recognize when that trust was misplaced. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting better. Danny was in prison, Olivia was struggling to rebuild her life from nothing, and I was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. They say living well is the best revenge, but I'd discovered something even better. Living well while ensuring your enemies can't do the same thing to anyone else. 2 years after it all began, I was standing in the kitchen of my new house. I'd sold the old one, too many bad memories, when the phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but something made me answer it anyway. "Adam Brooks?" The voice was unfamiliar, professional. Speaking. "This is Detective Morrison with the Boston Police Department. I'm calling about Daniel Harper, also known as Danny Harper. I believe you were involved in his arrest?" "I provided evidence, yes. Why?" "Mr. Harper was found lifeless in his cell this morning. Apparent suicide. I wanted to let you know in case you had any concerns about your safety." I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no fear. Just a sense of completion, like the final page of a book I'd finished reading. "Thank you for letting me know, Detective." "There's one more thing. He left a note. Most of it was rambling, but he mentioned you specifically. Said he underestimated you. Called you the one who got away." After I hung up, I poured myself a scotch and walked out onto my deck. The sun was setting over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. In the distance, I could see the lights of the city beginning to twinkle on. Danny Harper was gone. Olivia was forgotten, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be, successful, respected, and surrounded by people who valued me for who I was rather than what I could provide them. I raised my glass to the sunset and smiled. Sometimes the good guys really do win. Sometimes they get the last laugh.